So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So November is the theme for the month of November is all about mindset and attitude. And immediately when we were planning out programming for this, I said, I know exactly who I need to tap. And that is my friend, Dana Borchert. She is truly a genius when I mean, every time I sit down and chat, whether it's just casually or professionally, it's 50% like a therapy session and also like a leadership development, empowering. Like I always leave with like 27 new ideas of things to do with the Rise team and the Rise community. Because she mixes her background is both in, she's her PhD in the science and the data, as well as just being so in tune with us all personally and like the personnel and mindset sides of it as well. So you guys are in for a real treat. Dana has a really interactive presentation, all focused on having an attitude of achievement, which as we are closing out what has been a very crazy year and preparing for what is surely going to be another interesting year, hopefully better. I couldn't think of anyone better to help us lead this conversation than Dana. Dana, thank you so much. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Kate. And wow, I was just sitting here thinking, you just filled my cup. That was the most humbling and sweet introduction. I am smiling, but like my insides are also smiling. So thank you for that. I am so excited to, I always like presenting at Rise. And so presenting virtually is always fun and interesting as well. My hope for today, November, all about attitude, gratitude, mindset. And I know many of you are already so in tuned with growth mindset and taking positivity in your lives, whether that's professionally or personally. And so today, kind of the little spin on this is that we're really going to talk about this attitude, this mindset, but at work. And what does that look like for you as a leader? What does that look like for you leading a team? And for those of you maybe between jobs, thinking about you as a leader in your community, as well as, hey, the leader of maybe your family. I feel like I have to lead that, group every day, and that's a whole different challenge. So we're really going to talk about attitude of achievement for yourself as a leader, as well as for your teams. Here we go. We are going to be doing quite a few breakout groups as well. So first of all, I know Kate gave me a overly wonderful introduction. So a little bit more about me. This is kind of my lives multiple. So one is I get to work with 20 different psychologists at CMA Global. We're headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. Prior to the pandemic, I was traveling quite a bit to Denver, where we opened an office about 6 years ago, and I lead a team of psychologists in Denver as well. We do everything from executive coaching, a lot of assessments for selection and development, and overall, pretty much we feel that when your people thrive, your business thrives. And so we're focused on people in the workplace. I also started Instagramming last July, and it was really an effort to kind of just share industrial organizational psychology knowledge with people. And it has just really become a fun hobby now as well. And so if you don't follow me, I'd love for you to follow me on Instagram, where I share lots on leadership development and IO psychology as well. And then I'm also a mom of 2 kiddos, Wyatt, who's 5, and Willow, who is almost 2. And I'm obsessed with skiing. I've been living up here in the mountains since March 17th, and I'm getting really excited for ski season. I used to travel, and now I don't. So that's no longer on my hobby list for the time being. And I love dancing and yoga as well. So that's a little bit more about me. And so as an overview today, we're going to talk about managing the mindset of your team, setting expectations and calling out when something's not right, and then also challenging the language you use on yourself. And the whole kind of idea around this is about growth mindset in the workplace, growth mindset for the leader. All right. I'm going to attempt to do some interactive stuff. So whether you're on the web or on your phone, please take out your device. And here's some instructions for how you can join our polling. If you're on your cell phone, you can text. The phone number is 22333, and then in the message you write CMA consult. Or if you're on your computer, you can go to this website, pollev.com, and enter CMA consult, and it will activate you. So I'll give you a moment to do that. All right. So to start us off, we are going to take a little poll. So first of all, the question is, only a few people will be truly good at sports, and you have to be born with it. A is agree and B is disagree. So far, we got 100% disagreeers. Awesome. All right. I'm going to go to the next question. Oh, can you send me the link for the poll again? Yes, let me go back. There you go. Okay, I'm going to go forward to the next question. A, agree, B, disagree. I often get angry when I get feedback about my performance. Got a little more variety there. Some agreeers, some disagreeers. Moving to 50-50. Well, that's great. We're going to talk about that today as well. Absolutely. It's hard to get feedback. Okay. So one thing I would love for you to do, and before you do this, so I want you to think about one thing that you have personally changed or developed in yourself. You could, let's say over the last 2 years, if you'd like to pick 2020 as your year, that's fine. But if you want to dive into 2019, and in order to make this work, separate your words. Instead of a space, use a period or a hyphen. If you use a space, it will separate it. So you can write a full sentence, just use a period instead of a space. Or pick one word, that's easy too. Yeah. Slow down, patience, calmer, confidence, attempt at mindfulness, thick skin. Absolutely. My name's Dana Borchert. Sorry, someone asked. Being less reactive, yes. Oh, thank you. Let me see. Okay, sorry, I was answering a question on the poll. Look at all these great things, guys. Self-care, choose happiness, healthier, calmer, network, patience. Look at all these things you guys have developed over this time. It's great. I think this also is very indicative of the Rise community. There's not a lot of like eating pizza and drinking beer and worrying. I mean, I think that happens, but then it's like, okay, what else can I go achieve? Maybe I'll start a business. Maybe I will pursue something new, go get my yoga certification. So there's always this like goal setting, I think, that happens within the Rise community. And we can really see this, I think, shared here as well. All right, so why did I ask you all these questions? Well, because it's a great way to dive into the growth versus fixed mindset. And as I presumed, as a team, as a community, you guys are very growth mindset oriented as it begins. So I'm going to do a very quick overview of growth versus fixed mindset. before I dive into kind of what this looks like for leadership. So, first of all, really the founder of Growth Mindset is Carol Dweck. And she really talked about that we can grow, we can develop, which is why I asked you guys how you've grown and developed. And I love all the answers. That when we look back, especially in prior generations, a lot of the thinking was you either had it or you didn't. And we see that in a lot of the language that's used when, especially in teaching and education, and how that's evolved as well. So the idea of a growth mindset is one of evolving, achieving, always getting better, always, we're not there yet. Where fixed is you either have it or you don't have it, whether that's intelligence or sports, or you're the star player on the team, in the classroom, or in the boardroom. So when we think about this in terms of leadership, we really want to think about what this looks like. So fixed mindset in leadership is somebody who tends to rank their direct reports. Well, they're good or they're bad. Also, this is someone who's really invested in demonstrating strong skills and intelligence. They typically talk about this, and they usually focus on their technical expertise because they feel like that's what they have. They tend to seek employees that support getting the work done, checking the boxes, the tactical elements, and they want to be the star. You can really see this in a lot of different organizations where the organization is really wrapped around the star leader. What's interesting is in a lot of the popular books and media outlets, when we talk about leaders, the ones that typically come top of mind are those that have created something around them. That doesn't mean they all have a fixed mindset, but we tend to hear about the leaders that are stars. It's the humble leaders that we don't usually hear about and that they don't always write about. And what happens because of that is we tend to start thinking, well, to be a good leader, I need to do X. And unfortunately, there's a huge piece that's just not being published about what good leaders are as well. So let's think about growth mindset in leadership. Growth mindset leaders focus on individuals' talents. So what is the strength that we can leverage here? I know a lot of people, including many RISE members, have gone through strength finders. And one of the reasons people love that so much is because it really does focus on the positive aspects and how can we leverage our strengths and grow those strengths. Leaders with a growth mindset do not focus on themselves. It's not about them being the best leader. It's really about developing a team that could lead without them. They also seek employees that have innovative ideas or employees that are willing to challenge their ideas, because the best idea comes from those multiple diverse perspectives. And they want an organization that is full of stars, not where one person tends to shine or stand out. Okay. Another thing to dive into is when we think about leadership from a fixed mindset leaders tend to respond when they fail with anger and blame. They don't view things as learning opportunities. They're incredibly ashamed, although they'd never admit that when they fail. And they tend to respond with anger and blame. Secondly, they tend to hide if it's really bad. And then the other thing that can happen as well is they create this environment around them that creates groupthink because the team around them does not feel safe. I'm not going to point out a mistake if I think I'm going to get blamed or anger is going to be directed at me or I might get fired or demoted. And then the second piece of this is me and the team, we're going to become people pleasers because we just want to keep that leader happy. We don't want to be the target, and things are going to go better if they're happy. So let's just agree with everything they say, advocate for them, support them in any way possible. So you can imagine this creates a lot of bad behaviors, inefficiencies. Yes, someone said kiss ups or yes, man. Absolutely. This creates a lot of inefficiencies and huge errors because if we're not challenging each other's thinking, we can really start going down some bad paths. So let's talk about growth mindset from the leadership perspective. So growth minded leaders really try to challenge their own assumptions. They look at everything as an opportunity to learn, and they constantly seek out new learning. So even by recognizing that you may have a bias or an assumption towards a particular topic or orientation, growth leaders tend to seek out the alternative perspective, and they want people to challenge their assumptions. Growth mindset leaders tend to be more data driven because they really want to know what's out there and challenge that, and tend to be more fact based as well. All right, so Carol Dweck really suggests that in order to continue to develop this in ourselves, we should be asking ourselves some of these questions. So we're going to break into small groups. Let's do small groups of 2 and do them for 5 minutes. And you might want to jot these questions down, because once we break into the groups, you can't see them. That's always one of the challenges. And so 2 questions. Talk with your partner about what are some strategies you could use to become less defensive about mistakes. Maybe that's coming up with a particular statement that you're just more comfortable saying so that internally you can process it. Or maybe it's thinking about some affirmation statements that you could tell yourself. Secondly, what are some ways that you can create more learning experiences for yourself? Because we're going to talk about this a little bit, but we can't grow if we don't stretch ourselves. So we need to continue to think about new ways to expand our experiences and get outside our comfort zone. All right, jot those down. And Kate's going to break us up into groups.
It was. Welcome back, everyone. Dana, Samantha was just saying they only got through 1 question, so that meant that it was a really great conversation.
Yeah, good. We really only got to our 1 question too, but I think we came up with lots of good techniques and ideas. So I hope you guys did too. I'd love to do a large group breakout, but I don't think we have time for that. So we're going to keep diving in, and we're going to have lots of more small breakouts too. Okay, so what I wanted to also talk about is the brain science behind growth mindset, because this is something I think we don't really like. We talk about it's important and we want to grow, but like, why? Well, at least from a physiological standpoint. So growth mindset actually grows our brains. So they have done several research studies. One of the more popular ones is with rats. They took rats and they put some of them in these boring cages that didn't have anything. Then they put others in these cages that there was a couple different scenarios. One is they had multiple puzzles and games and activities the rats could do. The other was socialization. So the rats were with other people. And in these situations in which there was more complexity and interest and novelty, including socialization, the rats' brains actually grew. And they grew in new ways and new connections. So it's really interesting. The other study really looked at people who had practiced certain things. So when we think, I don't know if any of you have read the book Outliers, but one of the big concepts there is the idea of 10,000 hours. And so the idea of practice itself of the same skill, the reason why it helps your brain grow is not because you continue to get better at that one thing. It's actually because it creates more space for you to now do new things, because the thing you're really good at has become habit. And it's this concept of we want to be smarter, more intelligent, so that we don't have to work so hard at certain things, and we can work harder at the novel things. So we create more space. I think about actually there's several dancers on the call today, or on the Rise thing, this meeting. And so I think about, professional athletes like we have here, and these dancers, they don't even think when they dance about pointing their toe or raising their leg above their head. That piece has now become part of their nature. They think about how they're presenting to the audience and how they're connecting, and maybe the complexity of a particular step, but the basics are just natural to them. Yes, someone shared learning to type is the same way. We don't even think about it anymore. And that frees our brains up to do more complex work. So, thinking about that, these things, challenging situations, complex environment, and practice are the pieces that actually help our brain grow. If you translate that to your team or to yourself as a leader, that's why it is important every once in a while to drive a different way to work or to read a book that challenges the way you would traditionally think, because it's going to spark this novelty that will help your brain grow and ignite. Now, the part of your brain that will grow really depends on what you're doing. So, if you're dancing, you're going to have different activation than if you are reading a novel. And so thinking about that variety as well. And if you want your brain to grow in those different areas, and when I say grow, yes, in some cases we actually do grow gray matter, but mostly this is the growth of new synapses that create activation in our brains. Okay. So with that, the first step in this process is developing growth mindset for yourself as a leader before we can really talk about growing this in your teams. So here are 5 key ways that Dweck really recommends that we can develop a better growth mindset in ourselves. And these are things that, they seem kind of simple on the kind of face value, but I don't know about you, I challenge with these daily. I catch myself in these pitfalls maybe once an hour. Okay, so let's go through them. So first of all, don't rush to say I can't. We really want to, step away and not say I can't do that. Well, can't you, or don't you want to, or is it going to be hard? What is that? And especially when we think of saying this as a leader, the impact of saying I can't in front of others impacts them. And I think that's the piece that we forget about so frequently. It's also like this tough balance of maybe you want to sound humble, or maybe you want to sound, you know, like you can't do it all. Those are good messages. Just be thoughtful about the way you're sending them. Is it actually sending a different message to someone else? So we really want to use the power of yet. I can't do this yet. There's actually a really good Sesame Street video about this. If you want to type in power of yet Sesame Street for your kids. And it's like, I can't bake cookies yet. I can't write my name yet. But as leaders, it's the same thing. I know a lot of leaders who say, well, I don't focus on that people thing yet. It's a motivational thing. It's not a skill based. We have the skills, the power to read people, to do good work, to learn technical skills, if that's what you want. So it's about the yet. Also, it's about learning. So we talked about failing, failing well, having pretty failures. And so ask yourself, when you make a mistake or when others on your team make a mistake, what would I do differently next time? How can I learn from this? There's a couple other ways we think about this if you want to jot them down with your team. Feed forward is a practice of practicing how do we get better next time as a team. And the military is famous for doing after action reviews, which is really a level setting after a military outing to say, hey, we're all in this together. What could we have done better? What did we do well? And how are we going to pursue going forward? So thinking about what would I do differently next time? And failing better really goes along with this. So stop thinking about failures as mistakes that we need to hide. It is uncomfortable for women in particular, but I think all people, to really talk about their mistakes. Actually, one of the things that brought me to Rise was the June 2019 Rise conference. I attended as a non-member and was just overwhelmed by the vulnerability and transparency of the people who presented, because they shared their challenges. They shared their failures. And I think in this community, you guys might look around and say, doesn't everyone do that? I mostly work with executives in Fortune 500 and large businesses. And let me tell you, they say it's okay to fail. They can't name a single failure for themselves, and they won't talk about it openly. And so that was a big shock for me. And I think it's a real advantage that the women of Rise talk more about their failures. And we talked about this, but change it up. Try new things, be curious, get out of your comfort zone. That's how we stretch and grow. I recommend to people all the time that one of the best ways to exercise your strategic thinking muscle is to listen to a TED Talk every day. And don't pick a TED Talk in your industry. I work a lot in healthcare, and I'm like, guys, pick things that are not in healthcare. That's how we broaden our scope, is by thinking about how we can apply something in education to the business world. Okay. All right. So we're going to practice this a little bit, and specifically with the power of yet. So what I want to do is break into groups. Let's do 2 again, because 5 minutes with 2 people seems reasonable. And really explore the power of yet. So think about some of these prompts, maybe write some of them down on the side here. I can't do this yet. This doesn't work yet. And I want to bring you back, if you are a leader in the workplace, really try to think about how this looks as a leader. So what in your team is going on that you don't get yet, that you're not good at yet, or that you don't know or it doesn't make sense of yet, and talk about the power of yet for 5 minutes in your pairs.
All right, everybody is back. Welcome back, everyone.
Well, I hope you guys all had some good discussions about the power of yet. I know in my group with Megan, we ended up like asking ourselves a lot of thought-provoking questions. Like, just because I can't do it, should I do it? Should I delegate it? Should I show more interest? So it almost just sparked more questions. Well, thinking about this, here are some thought prompts to think on. So instead of thinking I'm going to give up, or it's not good enough, or plan A didn't work, or I made a mistake, or I'm not good at this, try to think about, what if I used a different strategy? Is this my best work? I think that's a big challenge. And I want to preface that because I also know some of the players who are on the call today are perfectionists. So that statement's not for you. You already do that. So if you're a perfectionist, cross that one off, because you're already asking yourself that one maybe too much. Also thinking about, is there an alternative approach, a plan B? And how can I really learn from this mistake? What am I missing? How could I go back and make it even better if I have time? Okay. I found this slide and I debated whether putting it in or not because of our time, but I just loved it. So if I were you, I would take a screenshot of this. I thought it was really cool about specifically a mindset during COVID, and really taking this even a step farther to think about an innovation mindset. And I think right now, many of these problems are floating through our heads. I can't do the activities I want. There's so many problems caused by COVID. Schools are closed. My kids are home. People are getting sick. I know in March, I was particularly like, oh my gosh, everyone's gonna die. And kind of stepping back to say like, okay, what does this really look like? What's happening here? So I thought these were some really great techniques. So it's, don't just be scared and worried. How can I stay well informed? How can I be educated and well-rounded about these topics? And how can I make informed decisions that are right for me and my family and my colleagues as well? So that made me, sorry, I had a thought. My thought was, yes, we can post the slides on Rise Digital too. The other thought is thinking about, this is kind of a question, thinking about what leadership and what being a good teammate looks like during 2020 and the pandemic. And I actually hadn't thought about this till yesterday when I had a conversation with a colleague of mine about an in-person get-together. And I shared with her that I was really struggling, that I wanted to show up as a good team member, that I wanted to be there. And if the expectation, I felt like although no one had said it, was that like good team members show up. And she said to me, I think this is a really interesting time to think about this differently. A good leader used to always be the one there, but maybe, and this is a maybe, thinking about being a team member and a leader and thinking about safety, example, concern for others and what that looks like today. And maybe it's not always actually showing up in person. So I want to kind of put that challenge to you and answer that for your community, your family, and yourself. I'm sure it's different for each one of us, but I think it's something interesting to think about. What does that leadership example look like during 2020? So thinking of yourself as a leader, how are we going to develop this growth mindset as a team? So in our team, there's really 3 different strategies. So the 5 strategies I shared with you prior about the power of yet and failing better, those work for your team too, but I wanted to really show you 2 different models today. So this one, I'm really going to focus on how we do this as a team. So the first one is empathy. In order to develop a growth mindset in your team, we really need to connect empathetically. I'm going to dive more into this in a second. We need to give feedback, positive feedback. People, I hear so often, no news is good news. I hear that from leaders all the time. And one thing that surprised me when I first came upon this feedback research is that good leaders actually provide a 6-to-1 ratio, 6 positive feedback to 1 critical or constructive. And most people are not doing a 6-to-1 ratio. Not only did that help their teams perform better, but it also helped them perform more efficiently because they knew what to continue to do. So often we overcorrect when we hear critical feedback and we end up not doing or stopping something that was actually really good. So think about that 6-to-1 ratio. And then strategies. So what are the strategies we're going to use to help develop this growth mindset in our team? So quickly, empathy. I know this group in particular, I'm preaching to the choir in terms of Brene Brown, empathy, and connection. So when we think about empathy with our teams, we want to think about really 4 core elements. So perspective taking. We want to get down on the ground with them, not just look at them and go, oh, that sucks. Also, we want to be non-judgmental, which is so hard to do, to not judge how that person or why that person is feeling that way. We want to recognize that we are seeing the emotion in other people. And then you want to communicate to that person that you saw it. Too often we see the emotion and then we move on to something or we move on to the solution instead of actually just sitting with, wow, I see this in you. Or let's experience this together. Let's sit with it is a statement that I've heard a lot this summer. I'll sit with you with this, in this grief. And I went back and forth including this picture because I know we're a female group, but I actually thought it was really powerful to show men connecting. And I think that's a powerful message for us to think about and make sure we're, encouraging in the men around us as well, that it's okay to sit with it, to communicate, to feel. All right, so team attitude. And the second piece is feedback. So here are some statements I want to give you, because I don't know about you, but I love having packaged statements that I can this sounds silly, but rehearse in my mirror. Because if I rehearse them in my mirror, when I'm caught off guard, they're a lot easier to say. So think about when you're a leader giving feedback to your team, think about how you can coach them in this area. So saying, yes, I know this is going to be a challenging concept for you to learn, but I believe you can do it. So giving them that encouragement. When they come back to you, maybe with a mistake or a failure, you can say, yes, I get it. You haven't gotten it yet, but you're going to get it. Let's keep working. And I really appreciate your efforts. Now, this one, I caveated on including it or not, because I also want to give you permission as leaders and as parents and as community members not to put up with poor performance. It's okay to hold people accountable. So I'm not just saying like you give everyone an appreciation badge, hold them accountable, but you can appreciate the effort. Getting better also takes time, and I see that you're improving. Look at where you've come. Help them see that gap and how they've improved as well. All right. And the third segment was the strategy piece. So thinking about the strategies, and a couple are here. So one is, what are some challenges or stretch assignments that you can help your team member experience? This is another thing with delegation. So often we think about delegation as passing it on to someone else, but actually delegation really develops talent. If you don't give the team members around you the opportunity to stretch and challenge, they will never grow, and they will likely never get good enough where you feel comfortable handing off a task. Also, if we're going to create a team that encourages growth, how as a team are we going to respond to failure? As a leader, I can set that, but I also, and this goes to the next thing, how are we going to hold each other accountable? So if my other team members start making fun of the person, piling on criticism, not delegating work after someone made a mistake because they don't have the time, how are we going to hold each other accountable for that? Because that's not going to foster a growth mindset as a group. And then also, how as a team, how are we going to react if someone gets defensive over feedback? What are our code statements that we're going to use with each other? So this doesn't need to be you just as a leader develop this growth mindset and then hope everybody gets it by osmosis. It's about conversations. And when you look at the research behind leadership, whether it's about anti-racism or ethical decision-making, leaders themselves who identify through a series of characteristics that are positive, their teams do not, it's a 50-50 chance whether their teams rate them as those characteristics or not. Let's say ethical. The difference is if the leader clearly communicates expectations, talks about accountability, and sets boundaries about that then the team says, hey, they really care. But if you don't talk about it, if you don't talk about this as a group, your team isn't going to know that you magically want to focus on growth mindset. Okay. So in order to empower you to have these tough conversations sometimes, because holding people accountable can be difficult, in our pairs, I want to talk about what are one or two statements that you could start using with your team when they demonstrate a fixed mindset. So when they say, we're so bad at this, or I can't do this, or this isn't our expertise area. So think about some maybe common statements that you hear from your team that might hold them back, and some rebukes that you could say or have in your pocket. So, and Kate, will you leave me in the main group for today for this one? And let's do 5 minutes pairs again. Well, let me look at the time. Oh, it's 12:30. Oh my gosh. Okay, so quick as I wrap up, it's crazy. How do you get started? Number one, make sure you take time for self-reflection, developing yourself as a growth mindset leader. You can't take care of others if you don't care of yourself. Get your team on the same page. Think about running a growth mindset podcast challenge for the week, or a book club to get your whole team thinking about growth mindset at work. And then make sure you set boundaries as a team. How are you going to kind of hold each other accountable? And so finally, here is a whole bunch of recommendations. If you're looking for good TED Talks or articles or books on mindset, but pretty much you could, go on to Apple Podcast and type mindset. You're going to find a whole lot of stuff out there today. I will say it's a little more challenging to find leadership growth mindset. Carol Dweck does talk about it in her original book, Mindset, but I think it often gets underplayed, and it's more about kind of, people go back to education quite a bit when they think about mindset. So I know that was a lot for today. We will post these slides to Rise Digital, and if you have any questions or want to connect, please let me know. Thank you, everyone, for joining in your participation today.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Good, yay.
Love it.